Hello everyone, this is Dan Munson, CS Business Mapping. I'm one of the founders of the company and one of the current owners. I'm responsible for sales and marketing here at CDS. For those of you who don't know, CDS Business Mapping actually owns the RiskMeter Online. CDS is basically the name of the company, and RiskMeter is basically the product. So people don't even know who CDS Business Mapping is. Today in this webinar, I have everyone muted on the webinar because sometimes there's stuff in the background, so it can be distracting. So to start today, I'm going to go through this webinar, this WebEx, and through this PowerPoint. At the end, I will have a Q&A, and everyone for the Q&A at the end. But through the presentation, I will have everyone on mute. You can type me a little message in the chat bar, but I have to say it can be very distracting, so sometimes I don't read them until the end. Anyway, so with that, why don't I start with the PowerPoint? Okay. So just a little background, as I said, a little about the company and the product, because the people on this call I think are customers, but I think there's prospects as well. We were founded in 1994 as a mapping consulting company. So it's a GIS. That stands for Geographic Information Systems. So really, the technology we work with is basically computer mapping. We started as a company that did all different types of mapping projects. We built some interfaces and custom programs for people using mapping technology. And we started the company around the Hartford, Connecticut area, and we started showing this technology to the insurers, and they said, hey, this stuff would be great for property lookups. So basically, we started working with more and more insurers, built the RiskMeter, and now that pretty much our whole business is the RiskMeter. We still do some mapping projects for people, like companies will come to us and say, hey, we have to meet with our board on Monday, and we'd like maps that show our concentrations, and we do them, and can you do it for us and have them done by Monday? Or, MGs will call us and say, hey, we have to map all of our policies. We're going to London next week, and I'd like to have maps to show our concentrations to the kids we work with over there. Really, now everything has to do with mapping risk, and now we're a national leader. The RiskMeter, I think, is probably the lead, if not the leader, one of the leaders, as far as the number of companies and people using it to do underwriting property lookups. What is RiskMeter? It's an online mapping service that does property risk reports. It's all web-based. Your answers come back instantly. It's quick. It's accurate. It's easy to use. It's not objective. You check individual risks in our entire book now. Many may not know that we have a batch.riskmeter.com. Allows you to run schedules through on your own. It's really, if you haven't seen it, I suggest you take a look. It could run thousands of policies for, let's say, flood zones or distance to coast. Brokers really love it on schedules. And also, companies are starting to use that to do book rolls. So before you commit to take an agent's book, you can look at, let's say, something like distance to coast or brush fire or flood zones to see if it matches your risk tolerance. The RiskMeter has been around since 1996. That was the first software desktop product, and the internet version, what we now RiskMeter Online, first came online in 1998. So we've been running the RiskMeter Online as a web service for 13 years. Now everyone's talking about software as a service and web services. We've actually been doing it that way for 13 years. Okay. For those of you who don't know, this is a partial list of the reports available. Distance to coast, flood zones, fire, earthquake, things like Mercalli scores, crime scores, state wind pool eligibility, surge, state tax codes. We have hail and tornado models. We can work with custom rating territories, building characteristics like year built, square footage, number of stories, elevation, aerial photos. Exciting things we've also done is we also now have agreed with RMS and EQE to do modeling. So if you give us an address, we can give you an AAL, which is an average annual loss, or a PML, which is the probable maximum loss for a location in less than a minute. So that's very exciting. We keep improving product that keeps growing, and that's, I think, one of the reasons we're a leader is we keep innovating. Okay, what we're talking about is parsable geocoding. And for you to understand what makes it different better, I think it's important that people understand geocoding in general and what we talk about when we talk about street-level geocoding. So in general, in the risk finder, we use what we call street-level geocoding. Geocoding is the process of finding geographic coordinates, geographic data such as addresses or zip codes. So when you type an address in the risk meter and you want the, I want to look at 123 Main Street, there's something in the background called an address dictionary that has basically of every street in the U.S. along with geographic coordinates, latitude and longitude. So if you say 123 Main Street in Boston, it goes finds it in its dictionary, and it says, I know that the coordinates between the corners of Main Street, between Broad Street and State Street, are this and this. Okay, so it's performed through the interpolation of street segments. And on the next page, and that means is we take the street addresses from a segment and we place a point relative to where that falls, and this is going to become out on the next slide. And what you have to keep in mind is there are different levels of accuracy when geocoding. So the country is giant, and one of the things to keep in mind is you're never going to have a perfect mapping data because there's always new streets. Rural areas are confusing. If you think about it, street maps really came from the census. It's really funny because when I try to explain this to people of why there's missing streets or why the address ranges are wrong, I say, look, giant country, and consider yourself if you were to drive out into the country somewhere on this rural road and you're supposed to tell the address ranges. Well, if you look at the mailboxes, the closest one to each corner, mailboxes. Understand why that could be an issue. Or in a city, maybe you can't tell what the exact corners numbers on a corner are. Maybe it's a vacant lot. There are a lot of different reasons that the streets aren't perfect, not. So if we can't get a good match, we fall back to the next best match we can get. And I think there's a slide that goes over that later. Okay. And so let me come back to this slide because I want to do this first. Okay. So this is a great slide that shows how, quote, street-level geocoding works. Okay. First of all, when we start talking about streets, in general, we think about them as a grid. And usually in the United States, the odds are on one side and the evens are on the other side. So just look at this 1600 block here. We have little notes here in the corners that say 1600 and 1601 and 1698 and 1699. So that's basically saying that, this side of the street is the even numbers and this side of the street is the odds. Okay? So what we really know is we know the lat long of the point over here, and we know the lat long right here. Let me clear the things here. Okay, we know the lat long here, and we know the lat long here. So we say, oh, I'm at 1650. It says, oh, I have the 1600 block, and 50 is about halfway down the street, and it's on the east side, so that's how it puts the point there. Now, if you look carefully at this map right here, you see in the background that these actually have the parcel outlines. On that 1600 block on the north, it really looks like there's two large parcels, and that's it. You got outline right here. Outline is right here. So this one is really 1620, and 1690. If you said, oh, I want 1690, maybe it's going to put the point here, but really great. And 620 is going to put the point here, which really is in the middle of this parcel. Okay, so there is inherently some error in street-level geocoding. Okay, so this talks about what the problems are. So first of all, not all parcels are the same width. That was one of the things I just brought up on the last slide. Not all numbers in an address range actually exist. So in general, in a street grid pattern in a city, go from 1600 to 1700. Well, the truth is there's probably not 50 or 50 lots on that street, on that side. There's not 50 on the other side. So the way they space those numbers affects how far down the street that point is. There's also irregularly shaped parcels. You could have a parcel that's an L-shaped, or parcels on the corners. Typically, they're one street, not the other, so it's not like you have an angle at the end. So, it affects how far down a street things are. Okay. Now, when we talk about matches, basically under our regular street level geocoding, you see basically S5s through S1s. S6s we have, but we don't like them. An S6 means basically it's a zip like PO Box would probably have an S6, or here in Boston, the Provincial Center has an S6, which is the whole zip code. But we find that some funny things happen with it, so we actually think S5s are better than S6s. But in general, when we look at match codes, the higher the number, the better match. Okay. Now, what we're saying is these 7s and S8s don't exist under regular street level matching, and I'm going to get to that. Okay. Now, so we talked about fallback, and if they can't find address back, and this is what I'm talking about. So I think there's a slide. The next slide, okay, talks about this. Okay. So here's our example where we had the block, and basically say we have the lat long to the two cross streets. Okay. So if we got an exact street match, maybe we're saying, look, the location is right here. Okay. Now, if we can't find that address, the next thing we do is say, well, do we read it and maybe the numbers are missing. Let's say we knew that we knew where Main Street was, and we had this segment in the middle here, but we were missing the numbers on this block. Okay. Some of the logic says, well, if I know the numbers over here, and I know the numbers over here, and they're both on Main Street, I can pretty much guess what the numbers in the middle are. That's what an S4 match is. It's saying that I'm on the right street, and I'm basically guessing how far the street is because there's some missing numbers. Okay. All right. Now 3 says, okay, I don't know. I can find that location. I have the coordinates for a zip plus 4, which are here. So it's saying maybe all the zip plus 4s in this area are zip plus 4s. So it's saying, well, I can't put it exactly where it's supposed to be, but I can put it pretty close. Okay? So as you go down from an S5 to an S4 to an S3, you're geographically covering a bigger area, so you're not as accurate. And then S2 is a zip plus 2 centroid, so maybe that's saying as well, I know that location is somewhere in this area, but I'm not sure. And then if we said it's a zip code centroid, then we're look, I don't know exactly where it is in the zip. It's somewhere in this whole big area. So that's what a geo result tells you, and that's why it's so important, because it's basically telling you how accurate your match is. Okay, and that's why if you ever get a funny answer out of the risk meter, one of the first things we always ask you is, well, what was the geo result? If you said, well, I don't like the answer, and you came back and you said, well, it's an S1 geo result, we say, well, you didn't like it because it's only placing at the center of the zip code. We don't know how accurate it is. Okay, so that's why this whole concept of the geo result is so important. Okay, now, how is parcel level geocoding different? Actually is where we get the parcel maps from usually the county or the city that have the lines of every single parcel. Okay? And it basically geocodes to the center of the parcel. So if you now they're on the parcels, like I said, that are generally taken from the municipalities or the counties. Okay, and then it's free, but usually the cities in all cases don't even have a good address on them because they're a taxing entity. So sometimes we have to do a lot